Oh, that's right. Hi, good morning, afternoon, sometime today on Monday. I'm really glad to be with you this afternoon. As she mentioned, my name is Ganesha Martin. I'm the Chief of the Department of Justice, Compliance, Accountability, and External Affairs Division for the Baltimore Police Department. They wouldn't give me the job until I could prove to them that I could say that without messing up. You guys have probably seen, a lot of fabulous slides and PowerPoint presentations today. And I promise you that I had planned on having some great slides and have them due by Wednesday of last week. But on Monday, I walked in after I got my coffee, and I'm sure you guys have this experience a lot as well. The police commissioner called me in his office and said, we need to talk, we need to have a meeting, we need to plan the takedown of 7 police officers that are going to be indicted this week. We need to talk about the press, we need to talk about the community outreach, and we need to talk about the ruse that we're going to use to get them to the building we want them to be in so that we can arrest them. Unfortunately, my slides didn't get done because Wednesday was the day that we did all that. So if you guys look bored, you're falling asleep, I promise I'll do a dance or something. I did plant somebody out there already that if I started to bomb, for her to pretend like she was having a heart attack. So I may move her up in the agenda. So, but nevertheless, I'm glad to be here to talk with you all today about policing, excellence through accountability, policing in the Baltimore Police Department. One of the big issues with the Baltimore Police Department, I'm sure you guys have had some of the same issues, is that it's an under-resourced police department that has been tasked to help an under-resourced citizenry. And in Baltimore, and this is human nature, we tend to focus on what our bosses focus on. In the government, our bosses are the citizens and the politicians. And in Baltimore, historically, they've always had the police department focus on homicides, which makes sense, but the singular standard being, have you stopped people from killing people today that want to kill other people? Oh, you haven't, so you're failing. And because of that, all of the resources, both human capital, fiscal capital, have gone to trying to kind of stop that bloodletting that's going on in some of our most depressed neighborhoods. So when I left City Hall as the assistant deputy mayor, I oversaw 6 agencies, one of which was police. I was guilty of being that bureaucrat who was always the taskmaster of the police department, saying, get me this, get me that, the mayor needs this, the mayor needs that, I don't care what your issues are per se. I need this information. And then I got to the police department and I realized why it was so hard for them to get me everything, because it was, just fire after fire after fire without the resources that they need, without the infrastructure, technology infrastructure and otherwise that they needed to get it done. A couple of things that I found, they were still using Lotus Notes. As a matter of fact, actually still using Lotus Notes. We hope to have that changed in the next couple of months. At the end of shifts, police officers take their handwritten police reports and someone drives them down to headquarters. And then at that point, officers that are too hurt to actually do their job sit at a desk and input the police reports into an Oracle database. That's still what we do. There's no computers in cars. Many other jurisdictions you've seen. For all of us who have been fortunate enough to have been stopped by police officers, you see them back there typing on their handy dandies. Now, that's not what happens in Baltimore City. There's nothing in the police cars. We had antiquated policies that were distributed by email, so hopefully you could read them, hope you understand it, hope you get the right training that you need. But a lot of times we had instances at the academy where instructors didn't know what they were there to teach. We had tons and tons of databases that did not connect and talk to each other. As a matter of fact, we didn't know who procured it, why they procured it, and how we're supposed to use it. We had rude and disrespectful police officers, and again, this is not all police officers, but I am running down for you a lot of the issues that we were dealing with. We had police officers who are tasked to police in some of the most tough districts in the United States with no psychological services, except for the ones that, the same services that would determine whether you were going to have your job or not. So you're not going to go talk about an issue with your wife or your supervisor or, you know, a drinking issue with the same person that's going to decide if you're going to keep your job. We have the lowest paid officers in the state, backlog of discipline cases. The capture and analysis of data was not even worth mentioning. We did not use data at all, really. And even in the realm of crime, it wasn't used to its best ability. We have civilians or rather sworn in the positions of civilians for very specialized jobs like HR and fiscal, and doing that job with really no background. We had an outdated website, and the list can go on and on and on and on. So when I came over as the chief of staff, I decided to kind of dig into these issues and figure out what we could do, again, with very little resources, even though most people, and this is true in most cities, believe that police have we do have the largest budget, but usually about 90% of that goes towards salaries and fringe benefits. So not a lot of money there to play with. So was looking at those issues, trying to figure those out, and then also going to community meetings with the mayor, the police commissioner, and seeing that there was a huge divide, a chasm really, between the police department and the community. And so we started to try to figure out how to deal with those issues. And that was probably, I want to say, probably about 2.5, 3 years ago. And then these issues started to really kind of take on a personal bend to me because I had people in my family who had been mistreated by police across the United States, and I think solely because of their race. I had a father who was a firefighter who almost died because the administration that he worked for had not provided the appropriate equipment. And so these things became very personal to me. And so as I moved through trying to figure out what we would do, I realized that I was kind of the perfect sounding board for a lot of the issues that we were going through. The police commissioner had actually started to invite me to most of the meetings that had to do with high-profile issues because the police officers would go through the scenario scene by scene. Oh, that's the such and such technique, and that's that technique. And then at the end, you know, the police commissioner would say, "What did you see?" And I said, "It looked like you kicked his butt," you know, and that's what the community is going to see. So really there was that tension there of, we know that there's issues that we really need to deal with, but there's some really sticky things that we have to look to. And around that time, the police commissioner asked me to take a leave and become the legislative director, acting legislative director, as we search for another one because our previous one had become a judge. And so it was all things police reform at that time in Annapolis, and in Maryland that meant fix BPD. So I went down there and really started the path towards acknowledging to the legislators and the community that there had been a lot of things that had been done that needed to be fixed, but we were on the right path. And then when I finished in the legislative session, I came back and told the police commissioner that I didn't think I should return as his chief of staff, that we needed to create a new division called the Division of Community Engagement, because I felt like the ground was shifting and that the issues with the community would soon explode. And so we created that division, and then the next day we announced it, and the day after that, Freddie Gray died. So talk about, hair on fire, gasoline shower. So now I've gotten myself in a situation where I'm supposed to be talking to CNN and Fox News and MSNBC and NPR about our community engagement, with this going on. And so, the next thing, we moved into a time where there was kind of chaos. Many of you all probably had the opportunity to see the city's pain up close through the news coverage, some of which was skewed, but nevertheless, it showed kind of what we were going through. And it ended up being a positive thing after a while because it really broke the city wide open. You know, both the community, the mayor, the police department, there was really no running or hiding from the issues that we had before us. And so the Department of Justice came in and began their investigation. And at the same time, I was sent to Seattle to kind of see what they had done right and what they had done wrong. They were under a consent decree, but had fought it for a long time. And so they lost 3 chiefs in the process, and they currently had a chief by the name of Kathy O'Toole, who by policing standards, DOJ standards, was doing great with data, with accountability, with programs that dealt with mental health and all of these issues that a lot of jurisdictions were seeing manifest in their jurisdictions. And so when I went there and when I came back, I basically told the police commissioner that we needed someone that was focused on reform, transparency, data, all of those issues 24/7, 7 days a week. It couldn't be a deputy commissioner's job. It couldn't be a chief's job that they got to at the end of the night. We needed to focus on that. And so not expecting to have that job myself. But shortly thereafter, our police commissioner was asked to leave by the mayor, and Kevin Davis was asked to be the interim police commissioner. And the day after, he asked me to form this new bureau. And so what I did was I looked at all of the major consent decrees across the United States and President Obama's plan on 21st century policing. And, you know, a couple of things, you know, jumped out at me. I'm not a data person. I don't know the first thing about data, but one of the things that I saw was how do you kind of prove your work? How do you do what you're supposed to do and prove your work? And then how do you know that what you've implemented actually works? And so it was very, like I mentioned earlier, very personal to me to make sure that the things we started to work on at the police department worked, because what I saw during the unrest, I saw police officers crying. I saw police officers saying, "Chief, we need help." I saw them suffering because of the lack of training, because of the lack of guidance, the lack of equipment they've been given. And then I saw a community that was hurting. I mean, pain, the unrest and the things that we saw. There's no excuse for the destruction of property. There's no excuse for setting fires and things of that nature. But that was an eruption of a long coming because of the socioeconomic issues that are going on in Baltimore. And none of those things have gone away, but we have started to work together on those things more than we did before. And so it was really important to me that as we moved into this idea of reform and data and transparency and accountability, that it wasn't something that the police department or the city just put a check box. Yeah, we did that training. Yeah, they know how to constitutionally police. Yeah, they don't stop, you know, African-American males disproportionately anymore. Yeah, we deal with the people with mental health and behavioral health crisis. We do that right. Check, check, check now. Because this was a city in crisis, it was a department in crisis, and they really, really needed help. And so what I tried to do was to take those issues that I'd seen, the very human issues that we needed to resolve, and say, okay, how do we take data? How do we make sure that that data informs our policies, our programs, our training, all those sorts of things? And I'm a lawyer. I never learned that stuff. So I had to try to figure out, how do I do this? So hackathon, right? Isn't that how you fix everything, a hackathon? So I'm trying to figure out how to do a hackathon, and I'm sitting and meeting with people, and they're like, what do you really want? Well, what do you really mean? And I'm like, I don't know. I need you to help me figure it out. And so enter stage left, the White House Public or Police Data Initiative, Denise Ross. She like dropped down from the heavens to help me figure this thing out. And so she put together a meeting between me, Code for America, and one of our local partners at the University of Maryland that does the Baltimore Neighborhood Alliance, Indicators Alliance. We started talking about a way to start, you know, bringing in the people that, you know, was going to be most affected by the things that we were doing. So we brought in police, we brought in community members, civic tech members, and we put up for the first time the things that really matter to a lot of our community members. It's a touchy subject though, but we put up police involved shootings, we put up our excessive use of force complaints, We put up citizen complaints, and we did this by way of demo. Code for America created a tool called Comport. And basically, it goes into our disciplinary database, it anonymizes the data, and then it automatically publishes and updates onto our website. I think they thought it was going to be like a couple of month process. It's been a very, very long process because our data sucks. You know, people were putting in all kind of stuff, and then you have this catch-all of, you know, other, and so somehow everything is other. And so they've had to really try to trudge through that data, but I think we're close, maybe a month or two away from actually having that published. And I think, and we'll have the input from the community that came in, the input from the police officers that came in as a major part of that project. And so the other thing that came out of when I was looking at the President's Plan on 21st Century Policing and other consent decrees is that putting out data is not enough. Again, that's a nice little checkbox to say we put it out there, but if communities can't use it, if they don't understand it, if it is not helping them meet you as you know, an executive or somebody in the government, if the data is not bringing you guys together to create a solution that's going to help you and them, then the data is for naught. And so that's one of the things that I struggled with and continue to struggle with is how do we make that data accessible and usable, and that's actually how I ended up coming around to Socrata. Crazy thing was, Code for America invited me to their conference in Oakland, and I've been hearing Socrata on these on these calls with the White House. And so I made a beeline to find the Socrata vendor when I got there. And I got there and I said, you guys, I hear you're great and I need you to come to Baltimore. And they were like, well, here's the Baltimore representative's name. And so, you know, it was crazy because we already had a contract and they were already there. And here I am searching, you know, for a solution. And I had to go to Oakland to bring us together, but you know, that's how the government works sometimes. So nevertheless, we came together, and we've been working on a couple of projects. So some of the main things that came out of my overview of consent decrees is how we deal with people in behavioral and mental health crisis, so our CIT program. So one of the things we started doing is tracking through our CAD system when we are called out to calls where there are people that are in behavioral and mental health crisis. And then we will begin to match that data up with our data on uses of force to see that if the training that we've implemented on use of force and de-escalation is actually working. We've also, that data has helped us garner some funding so that we could create a program whereby you have a licensed mental health professional in a car with a police officer so they can respond to the scene. And hopefully those people are diverted to services that they need as opposed to going into incarceration, because all of us know that they don't get the treatment that they need while they're there. The other thing we started looking into is wellness and officers. I mentioned to you that there were no psychological services for police officers. We fought for funding, and there's an RFP out right now for psychological services for police that will be totally separate from the administration. And we are looking at two different ways to utilize data on that front. One, we are working with the Vera Institute to use biometric methods to hook up police officers to kind of see when they're stressed most, what they do when they're stressed. So again, that we can use that data to come up with a program or policy that's not just, oh, we taught them about implicit bias. We taught them about how to stop a person correctly. I mean, what's really important, and I would impress upon you, is that, you know, data can be very sterile. I still don't understand it. But when you use that data to actually help a human being do their job better, I think that's the key. And so, and to do that in a government entity like the Baltimore Police Department is a luxury, which is why I said that there had to be one person that was focused on trying to use the data and for transparency and for accountability, because the only way you come up with ideas like this is if you have the time to kind of think about it. And so instead of telling a police officer, okay, you've identified that you have, implicit bias against little Jewish women, And what do they do about that? When they have the awareness, now what do they do about it? Well, maybe we can actually create something where biometrically, they're starting to understand their body, they're starting to understand how they respond, and then we can give them a way to interact with that person that doesn't lead to a negative interaction. We're all human beings, and if your boss may tell you, stop doing this, or your parents might have told you, do that, and if you don't know how to do it, then just telling somebody how to do it, or to do it, it doesn't make a difference. And particularly with police officers, I was just in a scenario-based training the other day where I had to go up to a house, and all I had was my gun, and I had to try to talk this person down. They had a fake knife, and they were off their meds, and I had to try to talk this person out of killing themselves. It was very surreal, because I realized how much pressure police officers may have sometimes, and it's incumbent, I think, upon us that sit in boardrooms with computers without that stress to try to figure out the ways that we can do something to actually help them. The other thing that I realized is that even though we're putting a wellness program together, how am I going to make sure that they use it? It's a culture that where they frown upon asking for help. So I'm working with Johns Hopkins University students. They have a platform of texting, counseling by texting. And so it takes that stigma away of having to sit in front of someone where you feel like you're being judged, and you're worried. And there's also kind of a way to group police officers. So there's these chat rooms so that you also have people kind of talking the same language. And so that's part of what we're looking at, for our wellness program. For our citizen complaints, one of the things that our citizens often talk about is you make a complaint against a police officer and then it goes into some dark hole somewhere. You never know what happens. So we're working on tracking those citizen complaints so that citizens can actually see what's happening in the timeline, what's going on. We've actually created what we're calling a transparency page, where we are dealing with a lot of the more communication through data, through accountability, so that everybody kind of knows where to find that. Also, as far as community engagement goes, one of the things that I realized was that you go to these community meetings, it's the same people all the time. And God bless them, the little grandmas, it makes a difference, but they were not the ones in the streets rioting. They're not the ones out there protesting. And so how do we begin to try to connect with that generation that feels disenfranchised, that feels that they've been treated wrongly by the police, and quite frankly have a lot of great ideas that we have to figure out how to get out of their head and cultivate. And, it's difficult when you need trust a lot of times and you need money for that. And we're kind of running low on both. And so one of the things we're doing is we're working with a company right now by the name of Peak Democracy, who will help us have kind of town hall type of forums. We'll put an idea. We're thinking about doing this program for stops, or we're thinking about doing this program for that, this policy, and then people will be able to say, I don't like it, and I don't like it for this reason, all these different sorts of things, so that we can kind of try to have that interaction. Police officers can do it as well. But on the police side, we were creating a working group of only police officers, and we have, actually, it's a high school, but a high-performing high school that's going to walk us through a design thinking method with those police officers, because a lot of times you get police officers in the room and they will only talk to each other. And so how do we, first of all, let them know that we care what they think about? We're not trying to shove reform down their throats. But we're trying to create policies and programs that actually go to what they have to do on the street, that we care about their welfare, that we're not trying to make them do things that will make them unsafe. And so they're going to walk us through that design process, and then hopefully the data that we get from that will help inform our policies and our programs. Oh, wow. I have 2 minutes left. Okay, so that's not what happened when I timed myself in the bathroom this morning. So I'll actually maybe stop, and are there any questions? I know I'm stopping abruptly, but I really didn't know I only had 2 minutes left. Yes, please.
What about connecting with schools, because it's said and they don't talk on
Absolutely, perfect.
so we need to teach them respect for police officers when police officer says stop.
Yes. So her question is, what about youth and teaching them how to interact with police officers? And that's a touchy subject, I think. I think that you're absolutely correct. And we have begun a program out of the police department that talks about that. We've also created a youth advisory board, and they put on Know Your Right functions and talk about those things. But the other thing we've done is I've paired up with a group called Code in the Schools. It's these kids that, you know, if you look at them, you think that they were probably a problem. But that's just a reflection of the communities that they come from. But they're brilliant, you know, and so they are actually taking some questions that surround youth and our youth problems and coming up with, they're going to have a data day, I think, on March 18th to kind of to look at these issues. So we have to find a way to engage the youth, and that's one of the ways that we're doing it through data. Yes, sir.
Have you guys looked at your crime statistics? So has Baltimore looked at the crime statistics specifically in the wake of Freddie Gray and other similar, because that's one of many sort of incidents within the community, to determine if the number of crimes that were reported have taken dips as a result? Because oftentimes what we see is every time there's a major incident like that, it looks as if crime goes down, whereas really it's just crime becomes unreported because there's an issue of trust. So you guys have that sort of same trend?
Yeah, so I can tell you that crime has done anything but go down. We have had 2 record years, the highest homicides in recorded history in Baltimore City. One of the things that happened is the pharmacies were looted. And so there were over 800,000 prescription pills on the streets. And so you had the big fish trying to take off the little fish and this and this and all this. So one of the things we have done, and data is behind this whole initiative, is where we've looked at all of our highest crime areas, and we've determined the top 4. And so the mayor convened all of her agency heads and said, here's where we have the highest amount of crime, and we know that crime is not just a police issue. It has all these socioeconomic issues that go along with it, schools, jobs, all that sort of thing. So they have to come together and say, okay, in this area, what can you do? Can you do something with jobs? What can we do for schools? What can we do about vacants? What can we do about lighting? What can we do about all these different things? That just started about 2 or 3 months ago, but we are using data mapping, GIS mapping, and all of that to try to do a collaborative, collective kind of fight against the crime, but it definitely has gone up. Yeah. So it looks like I'm out of time. Thanks, you guys. I appreciate you being here today, and keep fighting the good fight.